And welcome to the Texas Talks podcast. I'm your host, Brad Swale. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Tom Burnett, the president and CEO of Southwest Sports Partners, as well as the founder and CEO of Lone Star NIL. Tom is a former NCAA Division I conference commissioner and recent March Madness chair. Mr. Burnett, how are you?
I'm doing well, Brad. It's great to be with you. Hope you're well.
Oh, I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to speak. I love what I do. It's a pleasure. I'm going to have fun, I promise. So I gave a pretty brief background there of who you are and sort of what you do, but I want to give you the opportunity to expand on that.
Well, I appreciate that. But you touched on some of the high points. Certainly, I've had a wonderful career in college athletics administration that continues in a little bit of a different role. But I was previously a conference commissioner here at the Southland Conference in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, where we served membership with schools in Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and at one point in Oklahoma. So a regional conference that operated at the Division I level. Certainly people in this state are familiar with the Stephen F. Austins, the Sam Houston States, the Lamar Universities, the great regional colleges in our state. And we had a number of those that we worked with. So that was really a labor of love for me to serve as commissioner. I had previously served at another conference in an associate and assistant level. So it's really kind of all I knew. But I had been commissioner for 19 years, and I probably extended the shelf life, or went beyond the shelf life, I should say, of being a conference commissioner. Even though I had a wonderful opportunity with the NCAA, I was able to chair March Madness and go through that selection process for our great tournament that we celebrate every year. So it was really a labor of love. But I got to a point where the job was changing. I wanted to do something different. The idea of consulting was of interest to me. I did not know quite yet that NIL would be a part of that as well. But generally, my Southwest Sports Partners opportunity was really to take what I've learned over 30 plus years in college athletics administration and try to help friends, colleagues, university presidents, athletic directors, and even some communities we've gotten involved with to help them with some sports tourism. So we're really excited about the opportunities there. And of course, NIL was an offshoot of all of that as well.
Yeah, I'm just personally curious, and I'm sure some of the listeners are as well. I mean, it's unique for someone to be, commissioner of March Madness, or a chair for March Madness, and NCAA Division I conference commissioner. Those are pretty. They sound like cool jobs to have, and they're sort of in the background. Obviously, people go to sports bars or at home or whatever. They're watching the guys play on TV, but there's a lot going on in the background. And I can imagine a lot of guys out there, maybe certainly women too, wanting to be a part of. How did you get involved in all that?
Oh gosh, that's how much time do we have today, Brad? But I would say,
are you a former player? I mean, how does one get in it?
Well, not beyond the high school level. Certainly in basketball, the NCAA tournament has always been operated by groups of administrators, certainly with a significant basketball background. Sure. Former coaches, perhaps, former players, certainly, if they also coached. But there's so much administrative work that goes into that tournament. Obviously, it's a huge financial opportunity for the NCAA and its membership. It accounts for about 95% of all NCAA revenue, what comes in off the media contracts, the event revenue as well. So it's very important to everyone in the NCAA, and to be from the Southland Conference to work at the football championship subdivision level, to be the first chair from that level. And I believe the first Texas-based chair of the tournament committee as well was just a great feather in the cap toward the end of that run as conference commissioner. But what the NCAA tournament's looking for are administrators, certainly, again, with the basketball background is predominantly the case, but those that have great experience. My basketball experience in college athletics was mostly around managing a regular season, officiating programs, our television agreements, our conference tournament, are promotions around basketball. So I had, again, maybe not the on the court experience that some people have, but I had everything around the court,
Yeah.
if that makes sense,
Sure.
from an administrative standpoint.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you a lot about NIL today, name, image, and likeness, which I think sort of started, what, maybe 4 years ago?
Yeah, it really, it's been talked about longer than that, but
Sure.
4 years ago, 2021 is really when it came to the forefront.
Yeah, I remember the controversy around it, and I think the controversy was kind of, and there's probably more to it, but paying kids to play sports, they should be doing it for the love of the game and yada yada yada, that sort of thing. And I always thought, well, I mean, people are watching and paying money because of these kids, and I think they deserve a little bit of piece of the action. I can understand both sides of it. Um, is that sort of the gist of the controversy?
Yeah, you really got to go back. If you're a student of history and you understand how we got to this point, you got to go way back to like the 1950s when the NCAA came up with what we now known as the phrase, the nomenclature of student athlete.
Yeah.
And that was put in place to ensure that there was not an employer-employee agreement with student athletes. Now, interestingly enough, when you go back through, beginning then and through, the early 2020s here, student athletes were the only segment really certainly within higher education, but maybe society as a whole, that could not monetize their name, image, and likeness. You as an individual could, maybe as a college student. When I was a college student, I was the sports editor of my campus newspaper. I got paid for that.
Yeah.
And, but these student athletes, they were kind of a carve out for the longest time where they could not do that. And ultimately, the growing litigation across the country got to a point where you just couldn't defend that system anymore. And I don't think any of us were against young people being able to, capitalize on their NIL, whether it was, something they were doing as a entrepreneur, a business owner, a musician, or even now. And I think we've come around to even as an athlete, you have an opportunity to take advantage of that. And obviously we've seen a huge escalation of that in the last 4 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I I mean, there's been, I'm trying to remember the UT football player who had a mustard brand, and I can't remember what it was, but I thought it wasn't real.
Oh, sure.
Dijon.
Bijan,
Dijon or something like that.
Dijon. That's what it was. That's right. But that's terrific and wonderful. And
Sure.
I never tasted the mustard, but I'm sure it was really good.
So, now that it's been implemented for a few years now, I'm not involved in this at all. I can imagine some pros and cons. I mean, pros certainly being that, there's young guys that are getting paid for their value, which I think is great. But there's probably some other parts to it that I'm not familiar with. And there's probably a lot of cons as well that maybe need to be fixed or addressed through, I don't know, regulations or just different practices. What's your take on the pros and cons?
Yeah, I think we're in a very different place than we were 4 years ago, even 2 years ago, honestly, where we were really thinking about what is that student athlete's opportunity, kind of separate to some degree from their athletic ability. Again, using the musician as an example, or Bijan, getting into the mustard business.
Sure.
It's really clever, and credit to everyone who came up and with that. And I hope that mustard's still out there being sold. But that's what it began as. It's slowly migrated into, maybe not slowly, quickly migrated into, what is that relationship now with the student athlete? Are we closer to an employer-employee relationship? Is this pay for play? And even as we've seen in recent days, as the Texas state legislature has come to a close, I think it's House Bill 126 that has gone through both the House. It's been modified in the Senate. and now it's headed to the governor for signature. And I think every assumption is it's going to be signed, and we'll
Yep.
move forward with what we kind of see as a codification of, a pay for play. Now, there's been some restriction on Texas universities that they could not, provide, funds, based on athletic talent. And I still think, not to be Pollyannish, but we're trying to stay away from that. But at the same time, in other states, we're seeing where that's been, it's kind of a wide open door that you can utilize NIL payments in recruiting, certainly performance. And Texas here with House Bill 126 has really kind of caught up and kind of made a uniform decision to match what's happening in other states as it relates to, what the compensation can be for. And it can actually now be used to recruit, student athletes. Now, in Texas, we still have some restriction on, you've got to be enrolled, you've got to be participating in your athletic program to receive the dollars. But there's also some restricted categories you cannot be involved with in NIL that we would all understand. So it's really changed over the 4 years, and it's actually kind of changed what we have, really focused on here at Lone Star NIL. We've gone a little bit different direction here in the last year or so.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit more about that bill that passed. Trying to look to see if I have the number on. I'll find it in a minute. But that's the one that allows high school recruits age 17 and older to participate in NIL. And if I'm understanding you correctly, are you saying that the school can pay the athlete directly, whereas the case of Bijan Dijon, that's the mustard company paying him, but if this law had been enacted, UT specifically could have paid Bijan.
Yes, the universities can now pay for NIL directly. Before, it would have been the mustard company or an agency representing both Bijan and the company, as a go-between. But now we've kind of, and that can still happen. You will still see some agencies out there that are representing a lot of probably more high-profile student athletes. I'm thinking of a Bijan or a Quinn Ewers at UT, that type of high-profile player that before they go to the NFL. But that's now the case where, again, kind of syncing with what other states are allowed to do. And let's not forget that, UT, as well as A&M and schools like OU are now in the Southeastern Conference, and a lot of those SEC states have really kind of opened the door for any and all opportunities for their flagship universities to do this. So, why wouldn't Texas follow to ensure they're not at any kind of competitive disadvantage, if that makes sense?
Yeah. And the way that I'm thinking about it is it gives Texas it gives them maybe a huge advantage if they can pay athletes directly. Is there a cap on how much they can pay them? I can imagine UT, if I'm not mistaken, has the second largest endowment in the world. Not that they're going to tap the endowment to pay student athletes. Maybe they would, but they certainly have more money than, say, I don't know, UT El Paso or or Texas State or even Texas A&M. How does that change the competitive playing field?
Well, it's a great question, and it is an issue. And that what are there restrictions? Is there a cap? There's another national legal issue. It's called the House Agreement that we're waiting on final approval from the Ninth Circuit and U.S. Ninth Circuit out in California, as it relates to what is that ceiling that they can spend? I think it's roughly 22% of projected revenues that they can spend now in directly compensating their student athletes. So, what is that at the University of Texas, like you say, versus a UTEP or UTSA? It's going to be a very different number. It's going to be very different at A&M and at Texas Tech and those that are all in on NIL. So that is an issue in that, it's presumed, as it probably should be, UT is going to have a much deeper opportunity to provide those opportunities. And as you know, A&M's not going to get left behind in that, and others are going to try to keep up as well.
Sure.
The smaller schools, it's they're just not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But they have to kind of commit to participating to some degree because recruiting's involved, and they want to be known as maybe a higher level program.
Yeah.
And they're going to want to be able to participate in this program to some degree.
Yeah, I could see, the I don't know, what's it called, blue chip recruits. Is that what it is?
Yes.
Yeah. The highest level recruits obviously are going to want to get paid as much money as they can. There's that incentive. I would want to do that as well. But there's also, if there's 100 blue chips trying to get to UT and they all get accepted, there's a large percentage of them that are not going to get playtime.
That's right.
There is that balance, and I'm wondering if there's education behind, the people representing them, whether it be coaches or agents or whatever, NIL, that's sort of explaining this process to them. Like, yeah, you're a great player. You go to UT, they're going to have a lot of great players. You may not get a lot of playtime, even though you might get a little bit of money. It might be better to go to Texas State or something like that, where you'll start every game.
Yeah, and I think the other thread through all of that is, are we still, is our purpose still education?
Yeah.
And having these young people, matriculate through the system, graduate, go on to lifelong success. I think it's been well noted, kind of a cliche almost, that so many of these young people are not going to go pro in sports.
Yeah.
Is this their professional opportunity to play college sports and be compensated for it in one way or the other? But ultimately, that competitive opportunity is going to run out. And are they prepared to go on into life in a, I don't want to sound old-fashioned or corny or whatever, but in a traditional,
old-fashioned and corny, no big deal.
Yeah, but in the manner that, maybe a lot of us from previous generations grew up thinking that, well, we're going to utilize higher ed to establish what we're going to do the rest of our lives, whether it's professionally, personally, with our families, whatever the case may be. And I certainly hope and desire that education is still a part of that. And that, again, that's really kind of where Lone Star NIL has really kind of drifted to in all of this, not so much the transactional standpoint of NIL, but what are the educational opportunities we have to share with young people primarily?
Yeah. So let's talk about Lone Star NIL. If I was, I don't know, a star high school quarterback or whatever, and I'm looking for, I want to go to UT, I want to go to A&M, I want to go wherever and play ball. What's that process like with Lone Star NIL?
Yeah, I think originally our idea was that we would be able to, and we were allowed to work independently. We had to fully disclose what we were doing. We worked with an initial group of a dozen or so student athletes from around the state, including power programs all the way down to Division III, and really enjoyed that opportunity to really kind of identify, bring in some high performing student athletes that not only were competitively gifted, but, very good students, had a record of success already as a young person, leaders on their campuses. We were able to do that. I think as NIL has changed into more of maybe a transactional compensation opportunity, I think what we identified, and I would still say this very strongly today, is there continues to be a lack of education in the NIL space. Okay. And that's not just young people. Part of that is, as many know, we do not have name, image, and likeness at the high school level here in Texas. In other states, you do. Our bordering states, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Arkansas, you can have high school NIL. And there is some of that happening. And I've got a friend in Oklahoma who works in that space. But I would say that because we don't have it, there's just not a lot of attention paid to it. at that high school level. And
Yeah.
that's not, again, not just the young people, it's their parents, it's coaches, it's administrators in that space. It's local businesses and such. And what we've kind of discovered is before these young people go off and make these kind of decisions, they need to be better informed of what this is. There's a little bit of training, especially if you're recruited by a high level program to get that. But what we've noticed is, most kids aren't going to go to a power program. There's a whole lot more lower level schools, and even in the state of Texas, than there are power programs. We've got a booming population. We've got an incredible best in class business environment in the state. Things are going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to have great high performing student athletes, even at the smaller school level, I should say, in the future. So we really have an obligation, I believe, having served student athletes most of my career, to provide as much of an educational opportunity as we can. And, that ranges from, how do you do contracts? What's your financial literacy? What do you know about taxes? Because taxes are, a part of this as well. What's your expertise in branding, NCAA policies, legal issues, social media conduct, all of that comes into play that, once you get recruited and you go to a big school, you're going to get a lot of that through the programming, but there's a lot more students and the people around them, such as their parents, who just aren't and maybe can't be as informed as they need to be.
Yeah. So when you're saying education, you're not talking about, making sure that they attend biology class. I mean, that's good. They should. But
Sure.
You're talking about, hey, you're about to receive a lot of money, and maybe you haven't received this much money before, or your parents have supported you, and that's great. But now it's yours. What do you do with it? How do you manage it? What are the legal regulations? How do you, the taxes certainly important.
Sure.
How successful has that been? I mean, for you specifically, but more generally, the NIL landscape in Texas, are they receiving? How has that been over the past 4 or 5 years or whatever that it's been legal?
Yeah, I don't know that a whole lot of attention was paid to that early on because there was this rush to the transaction, so to speak. I'm going to endorse this brand, and I'm going to get my money. And the cart got ahead of the horse, so to speak.
Yeah.
And now we've kind of seen it's obviously we've gotten the horse back in front here to some degree, but I think that the educational part is growing and growing. You are starting to see maybe in the third party space some people providing some educational opportunities. We're doing it probably on a smaller scale with some individual student athletes at the high school level, their families. Some small groups. We haven't gone really big with it, but it's something we are considering as we go forward. I think a lot of us are waiting on this latest litigation to be resolved, and really, what does this look like going forward before we all take, whatever that next step is in this space. So there's kind of a pause button. Even though it's college athletics, it's hard to pause anything because we got recruits coming to campus. We got student athletes enrolling as early as, this week and next for summer session. We've got volleyball, football, fall sports practices starting in late July and into August. So, it's here, and, people need answers. And we're waiting on this litigation from the Ninth District in California, because it's supposed to go into effect on July 1. Well, it's less than a month away. So we're kind of patiently waiting, but we need to educate people. We need to get moving on whatever this is going forward. And we haven't even talked about the federal implications of what a federal legislation. I know that Senator Cruz is very involved with on what might happen in the future with all of that.
Well, so tell me more about that.
Yeah. All of these states have different rules, just like Texas House Bill 162 or, whatever the education code of state law said before that. There's a push across the country, and you're seeing a lot of it come out of the athletic world that, and I'll use the Southeastern Conference as an example. You've got 10 or so states that comprise their membership. All 10 of those states have a different rule, and they're recruiting differently based on their own state law.
Yeah.
And you've got to follow your state law. But a federal uniform law could come in and say this is going to be the federal standard across all states and render the state legislation null and void, because there's now a federal opportunity to ensure everyone in all of these states is, kind of playing by the same rules. And that's been a loud voice from the athletic administration world in the last couple of years, is we need some uniform opportunities, because recruiting is everything and people are recruiting with different rules.
Yeah. Do you think that the federal legislation, should it come along, I'm sure it will eventually, do you think it will just provide sort of guidelines for states to work within and to make their own rules? You just can't go beyond this? Or do you think it'll be blanket, everyone, all 50 states, these are the rules, you don't go out, you don't do anything else?
It could be that.
Sure.
It could be that blanket ruling, but certainly, there may be, okay, here are the restrictions. Anything up to this restriction is okay.
Yeah.
I guess I could see that. So, the speed limit might be 70, but you can drive 65.
Sure.
Maybe a poor analogy there, but
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's, is it going to be easy to get that? I don't know. So far, it has not been. Ultimately, what's the makeup of Congress? What administration's in charge of the White House? Things like that. People, on different sides of the aisle have a different view of what this is, just like they would on any other topic.
Yeah, I can imagine Texas being Texas. They will try to go the speed limit 70. They're going to try to go to 100. Whereas
that's the way it worked.
Yeah, I don't know. Massachusetts might not care to go beyond 45. Who knows?
Right.
Right. So I want to ask, with Lone Star NIL, how do you identify athletes to work with? What's the criteria? I don't know. That might be proprietary information, but how do you identify them?
Yeah, it's another great question. I think it can work. We can identify them. We can kind of seek out. I think initially, because I'm based in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I was looking for North Texas student athletes that I was probably more familiar with. Sure. I knew about their success either early on in college or maybe even going back to high school. We did spread that out a little bit more. I think right now, as we kind of wait for what NIL becomes, we've kind of opened the door. Anyone in Texas who has gone to a Texas high school, who is attending a Texas university or college, they're more than welcome to inquire about what we're doing, that type thing. So it's kind of either way. It can be someone just approaching us, to learn more about our program and what we're involved with, as opposed to us actively recruiting, so to speak.
Sure.
I don't know how good a recruiter I am, but I think what we find is student athletes are obviously interested in a name, image, and likeness opportunity. And we found that with rare exception, those we approached were very interested in what we were doing. Yeah,
I can imagine. So as far as the opportunities that you help sort of create and facilitate, we brought up we've beat the dead horse of Bijan's Dijon, but there's others, local car dealers or whatever, right? What is that sort of the bread and butter of NIL, your bread and butter, like those sort of local endorsements, that is more accessible to most athletes, or is it national deals? Is it, statewide? Who knows?
Yeah, it could be all of the above. I think certainly the local opportunity, kind of the hometown agreement, is something that kind of works really well. It can work at the high power level. It can work all the way down to the junior college level, quite honestly, because in some of those communities that are home to our community colleges, that's a big deal. And, further, if they play football, because we know how important football is in the state of Texas, even at that level,
Yeah.
there's going to be interest there. So I think the local hometown opportunities are really strong. I think, too, we've had some really great conversations with statewide organizations that are really focused in the state of Texas. They kind of understand that, hey, these are kind of, our young people. We're providing opportunities. Not only is it an athletic opportunity to maybe have an agreement, but let's talk about the future of these young people. What could we be doing for them in a professional development sense? How can we tie them into a company that's focused on the state, as we've said, but what does the future look like for the workforce in Texas? I think we know just from studies that most Texas kids, and I'm sorry to use the term kids, but young
That's all
people,
right.
stay in Texas for their professional and personal opportunities going forward. I think a very large percentage. But what can we do to better formalize that? And could an internship at a large Texas-based company help a young person kind of solidify, hey, this is where my future is. I'm going to stay here, or I'm going to do something like this, maybe, across the state, maybe in Houston or in the Valley or wherever, that allows, the opportunities I've had in college, not only athletically, but from a professional standpoint, or maybe involvement with a charity or something like that, that really solidifies a young person's future
Yeah.
as a leader in this state, whether that's, business, politics, civic engagement. Those are very important things as well. And we want to ensure that, student athletes that are very high performing can continue that again after their athletic career is over.
Yeah, I think that's great. Certainly the civic engagement using a lot of, you call them kids and they're kids. I mean, I don't know, if you called me a kid, I'll take it as a compliment. But there's a lot of college athletes that young people look up to, and, that civic engagement, whether it be charities or, local community stuff, I think that would be really valuable to Texas. So you live this, you've thought about it, you work in the space, you were former, March Madness chair, NCAA Division I conference commissioner, you're doing NIL. What hurdles do you see on the horizon? If you had total control over this, what do you think needs to be done in the NIL space? Maybe, there's the 90th Texas legislature will be in a couple of years. I don't know if they'll address this sort of thing again, but what do you think needs to be done to make it better?
Well, NIL's here to stay. It's not
Sure.
going anywhere, and that should be the case. I mean, no one's arguing against that. I think people kind of confuse or conflate issues in NIL with what we know as the transfer portal in athletics. And the transfer portal really is just a removal of the regulations that we've historically had on how young people can move from one school to another. We see a lot of transferring among student athletes across various levels of college. We have, I will tell you an example of a baseball program I know that's actually out of state. Of their 32 student athletes on their baseball team, all but 3 are in the transfer portal. So they're looking for another opportunity to go. And NIL's driving a lot of that because people are being told, hey, there could be an NIL opportunity for you at school X as opposed to school Y, where you are now. You can check it out and go into the portal, and you're essentially a free agent to see if there is that opportunity. And I think what's happening is a lot of young people are going into the portal based on NIL, really not realizing a great opportunity for them or any opportunity at all. And the former school has kind of given up on them because they've got to make decisions for their future.
Yeah.
And now you see young people without an opportunity. And that is a tragedy. That's a real tragedy in all of this. So if I could wave a magic wand and do anything, it would be to get control of the transfer portal. We're going to have NIL. There's no doubt about that. But it's the transfer portal that's really, kind of messing things up. And again, unfortunately, it's partly being driven by, NIL dreams or fantasies or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Are you, I mean, obviously students should be able to go to a different school if they so
Sure.
choose. Absolutely. It's a, I agree. It's a tragedy if someone's telling them, hey, if you go to UT, as an example, you could get these NIL deals and then it falls through, they get less playing time or whatever happens, or they don't even get recruited. Who knows? So how do you wrestle with the transfer portal?
It's another aspect of what we do
Sure.
where, whatever it is, it's going to be, filled with litigation.
Yeah.
And, I can't control just what a regular student does.
Yeah.
For example, the transferring from one school to the next. The argument is, how do you stop a student athlete from doing that as well? And that's a great question that I don't have the legal mind to answer that or figure that out. And I'm not trying to, certainly.
Sure.
But, it's somewhat startling to see some student athletes are at their fifth school, their fourth school. And, I remember in my day, people transferring to another school, but they might have done it once.
Yeah.
Maybe twice if they went to a community college or something like that, which was fine and good. You didn't really question that. They were on their pathway to, their success, and this is how they got there. So, but when you see a young person on school number 5 and maybe even as many as 6, believe it or not, that's not about, to me at least, and this is my only personal opinion, it's not about academics anymore. It's about what is that financial opportunity. I would hope that young person would get a degree and go on into, society, like a lot of us were able to do. But you just wonder, where are they academically? Are they on progress toward a degree?
Yeah.
And that I still believe, and again, my old school thinking is that ultimately has got to be what this is about. And I'm not quite sure at times it's about that anymore. It's about, how can I get mine and get it right now?
Yeah. Well, Tom Burnett, president and CEO of Southwest Sports Partners and founder and CEO of Lone Star NIL, I think it's a great place to, I mean, if you have more, I want to know, I'm going to ask you, I think it's a great place to end. That's a great message to end with. But if there's something else that we didn't cover, I want to give you the opportunity to mention that now.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that, again, it's kind of, what we talk about today may be very different in 30 days. It will definitely be different in 5 years.
Yeah.
On where we're going, but it's not going away. We'll see what the federal government does, if anything. Here in Texas, we get a shot at it every 2 years when our legislature convenes. So it's not an annual issue here in Texas. I think something, where is the UIL here in the state going to be in the future when it comes to high school NIL? That is going to be one of the next things that I think we'll all be talking about. But again, it may be in a couple of years. It may be in 4 years as these legislative sessions come together. But still a lot out there, a lot of unknowns, but it's a brave new world, and we're only 4 years into it.
Yeah. Well, Tom Burnett, thank you so much for your time. Is there a website or social media that you wanted to plug?
Yeah, sure. People can check out lonestarnil.com. Can also find me on LinkedIn at Tom Burnett, and happy to communicate and share anything we can with folks out there.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you, Brad.